5 years of visits. 5 years of being told nothing was wrong. Margaret died on a Thursday afternoon. Her husband found her on the couch. She'd come home from school early because she didn't feel well. Cause of death. On the ER report. Multi-organ failure of undetermined origin. She ended up on my table the following Monday. I made the Y incision. Standard procedure. Opened her up and stopped. Her intestines were swollen to nearly twice their normal size. Her liver was enlarged, discolored, riddled with damage. I've learned to recognize, after 27 years, and everything, the intestines, the liver, the surrounding tissue, was coated in that thick, gray film, biofilm. So dense in some areas, you couldn't see the organ tissue underneath. I reached in and lifted a section of the small intestine. Colonies. Dozens of them. Worms burrowed so deep into the intestinal wall they'd broken through in places, spread into the abdominal cavity, tunneled into her liver. Her liver didn't fail because it was old. It failed because something had been eating through it for years. I stood there for a long time, looking at Margaret, a 52-year-old fourth-grade teacher who sang in the choir and fell asleep grading papers because she was so exhausted she couldn't keep her eyes open. And I knew exactly why. I wrote multi-organ failure on the certificate. I didn't mention the parasites. I didn't mention the biofilm. I didn't mention the colonies that had destroyed her liver from the inside. Because that's what we do. Parasites aren't listed as contributing factors unless the infection is so catastrophic it can't be ignored. And even then, there are reasons not to. If I write parasitic infection, there are questions. How did she get infected? Why didn't her doctors find it? Could this have been prevented? Who's responsible? Her husband would sue. The hospital system would investigate. Medical licenses would be reviewed. 5 years of visits where nobody tested her for what I found in 30 seconds on my table. So I wrote organ failure, closed the file, moved on. Dean came to my office 2 days later. He sat across from my desk, still wearing his coaching polo, hands folded in his lap, trying to hold it together. Can you tell me what happened? The hospital said they don't know. Organ failure. But she was 52. She was healthy. She just had some stomach problems. And she was tired all the time. How does someone die of organ failure at 52? I looked at this man, a man who would go home that night to an empty house, who would sit at that kitchen table where his wife used to fall asleep grading papers, who would spend the rest of his life wondering why. And I told him what the certificate said. Sometimes organ failure happens without a clear underlying cause. I'm sorry. I wish I had more answers. He nodded, thanked me, shook my hand, walked out. I sat at my desk for a long time after he left. I had the answers. Every single one. They were in my autopsy notes, in the photos I'd taken, in the samples I'd collected and would never send anywhere. I just couldn't give them to him. Margaret wasn't the first. In 27 years, I found parasites in hundreds of bodies, maybe over 1,000. I stopped counting around year 15 because the number was making it harder to sleep. A 47-year-old man, sudden cardiac event. His heart was fine. His intestines were so full of parasites and biofilm they'd gone septic. The infection reached his bloodstream. I wrote cardiac event. A 61-year-old woman, unquote. Complications from chronic illness. Her chronic illness was undiagnosed parasitic infection that had shredded her intestinal lining over decades. I wrote complications. A 38-year-old father of 3, liver failure. His liver was tunneled through with colonies that had been growing since his 20s. I wrote liver failure. Every one of them had complained about the same symptoms for years before dying. Bloating, fatigue, brain fog, abdominal pain, sleep problems, sugar cravings. Every one of them had been dismissed. IBS, stress, aging, hormones. Every one of them had tests that came back normal. And every one of them ended up on my table with parasites so established they destroyed organs from the inside out. I signed every certificate. I wrote the wrong cause every time. And I went home. That's what I need you to understand. I'm not a whistleblower. I'm not brave. I didn't fight the system. I was the system. For 27 years, I helped bury the truth. Not because someone ordered me to, because it was easier. Because organ failure is 2 words and doesn't ask questions. Because I told myself it wasn't technically wrong, the organs did fail. I just left out the part about what made them fail, and I would have kept doing it until Karen. Karen is my wife. We've been married for 22 years. She's 53, healthy, active, the kind of person who's never missed a day of work. About a year ago, she started complaining about bloating after meals. Nothing dramatic, just enough to notice. She'd push her plate away and say she felt full and puffy. I didn't think much of it. Then came the fatigue. She'd fall asleep on the couch by 8 p.m. I'd find her there when I came to bed, still in her clothes, TV still on, like she'd been knocked out mid-sentence. She started waking up at 3 a.m. every night, like clockwork. She'd lie there, staring at the ceiling until the alarm went off. Then, the brain fog. She forgot her sister's birthday. She'd lose words mid-sentence. She came home from the grocery store once with nothing she went there for because she couldn't remember the list she'd written that morning. Her doctor said stress, then hormones. Then, this is just what happens in your early 50s. The exact words I'd read in Margaret's chart. I sat at the kitchen table one night, watching Karen rub her swollen stomach, and I felt something I can't describe. I'd seen this, not once, hundreds of times in the charts of people who ended up on my table. Bloating, fatigue, 3 a.m. wake ups, brain fog, the same symptoms, the same dismissals, the same negative tests, the same progression, and I knew with absolute certainty what was growing inside my wife because I'd been finding it in bodies for 27 years. Karen's doctor ran the standard tests, blood work, stool sample, everything came back normal. Of course, it did. I've opened over 1,000 people who tested normal their entire lives. The tests don't find what I find on my table because what I find isn't floating around in stool samples waiting to be detected. It's burrowed inches deep into the intestinal walls, protected behind biofilm so thick I've scraped it off organs with a spoon. Invisible to every standard test the medical system runs. The tests are designed to miss this. I knew Karen had parasites, the same ones I'd been finding in bodies and lying about on death certificates for nearly 3 decades. And for the first time, the person heading toward my table was someone I loved. I couldn't write organ failure on Karen's certificate. I couldn't sit across from my own children and tell them I didn't know why their mother died. I had to do something.